I often feel like my job is to trick people into paying attention to the world around them. Beauty, light, and composition are my tools to draw one's eye into the events and issues many would rather avoid. During this presentation, I'll share my process in dealing with the chaotic events of our time creatively, professionally, personally. When I started as a photographer, I described myself as a community journalist, a journalist that focuses on people, small communities in the United States. I never considered covering war. When the Iraq War was imminent, the Washington Post sent me, and I stayed for the better part of 7 years. This is one of the first scenes that I witnessed in Iraq, in the days just after the fall of Baghdad. A Marine threatens a man detained while robbing a bank. It was also the first time I saw the dramatic differences in the way people can interpret a photograph. This photo ran on the front page of the Washington Post. Some readers thought it represented unbridled rage and unfair treatment of Iraqis. Others, including this Marine, favored the photo, a moment they thought showing the strength of the military. I felt a huge and strange disconnect between this war zone and the country that brought it to this point, the United States. Covering Iraq was a gruesome ritual of suicide bombings, hospitals, patrols, roadside bombs, routine chaos. For many years, my normal morning started with a boom. I would run to the car with Omar, my best friend and driver for 7 years, and we would drive around Baghdad, scanning the horizon for smoke and the source of the bomb. There was the scene of the bombing, the hospital if there were survivors, the morgue, and then the funeral. I stayed and stayed and stayed in Iraq, not for the adrenaline rush many hear about, but to try to end a never-ending feeling of failure. Failure to get people in the United States to pay attention. Honest, often harsh war images are necessary. Photography freezes a real moment in time forever. But often, people turn the page without looking, and we have to ask why. Being upset in a situation, enraged, sickened, I think is good. Getting people to look and ask questions is necessary in order to learn and survive as a country or as a people. But I also realized people won't care about someone in a different culture, language, religion, or situation unless they can relate to them first. So back in Baghdad, I returned to the idea of community journalism. I created a column which ran weekly in the Washington Post called Unseen Iraq, my favorite part of the week. And I thought about my readers, people in DC walking into their office after battling traffic, or even the President of the United States, and I wrote about Qasim Ali. He waits for his ride on Al-Mawal Street near Baghdad's Sadr City. A minibus, one of many stuck in traffic, will take him and other government workers to the Ministry of Trade, where he's worked for 30 years. This is his Monday morning commute. The street is heavy with trash and car exhaust. Street dogs own the sidewalks. School children jump puddles of sewage, and a donkey bays at his driver's sharp whip. This is a family reunion. She wasn't able to see her parents or niece for over a year due to the steady violence surrounding Ramadi, which subsided for only a few months. A fisherman tries to cool off in the morning, fighting Iraq's impatient sun. Due to military convoys and main streets cut off from traffic, driving through Baghdad was often impossible. The fishermen on the Tigris River became river taxis. A dust storm, best friends who are told to come home before the streetlights come on in the evening, something my mom used to tell me when growing up in small towns. And beauty contests, things people normally don't see from Iraq. Little Miriam in this photo was homeless. Her family owned a house next to one of Saddam's palaces, which was bombed. They lived with various extended family members until they outstayed their welcome. And a profession that tends to thrive in wartime, prostitution. This is Hala. Her husband died in the violence of the Iraq War. She turned to prostitution to support her family. This is the reason she does what she does, her children. Through her body language, you can tell she has given everything to them. Headscarves, a simple piece of cloth, has given me another obstacle in getting people to pay attention. In the US, or places unfamiliar with the Muslim faith, headscarves have come to symbolize something else. In photographs, women become an airy prop. In composition, their humanity is lost. In Iraq, I attempted a portrait series of widows whose job it was to search other women at checkpoints. They called them the Daughters of Iraq. But I took their photos not only to tell their story, but in hopes that when you see them, one after the other, you focus on the individual personalities of these women, and that the headscarves, the abayas, melt away, and you see the rage, the sadness, the empty resignation, the doubt, determination, anger. You see them as individuals. I rarely know when I succeed in getting people to pay attention. One year I spent time in the camps of displaced people living around Kabul, Afghanistan. One winter was more harsh than the others. The Afghan government, anxious to clear these camps, didn't allow aid organizations to bring in supplies. Children started to die in high numbers. This photo ran on the front page of the New York Times. The reaction to it was intense. The Afghan government, US military, aid organizations, individual people all took action to help the displaced. What is it about some photos and some events that get people to pay attention and others not? I think here it was again about getting people to relate to each other. The photo ran just days after Christmas. It echoes much of the imagery from the nativity scene, drawing deep connections between cultures and religions. But this kind of direct reaction to a photo has only happened a few times in my 20 years as a photographer. I've learned to cover each situation as a step, a small step. I look around, observe, gauge the danger for me and the people working for me, and take another step, concentrating on the logistics of what I can do at that moment. I do this while being thrown from one situation to the next, often the same story repeated over and over in different countries. This is Ingushetia, a republic of Russia, one of the most dangerous places I've ever been. Again, I focus on the people. In some images, the purpose is to make people ask questions, bringing people into a story, making us read, to show the sad and beautiful, the physical and mental scars often left behind in war. Gaza. Eventually, the world seems small. Most events, an obvious reaction to the next. Chaos, in my opinion, is a series of moments like those I'm showing you. And I'm sure when you see them strung together, it can feel overwhelming, and maybe resting in that uncomfortable space is a good thing. It's reality. Here on a rooftop, I was with a family in Gaza. I watched bombs fall, shaking the cement house beneath me. People often ask me how I mentally deal with conflict in a personal way. While traveling to Afghanistan, Iraq, Liberia, Gaza, I look for access to a roof. Sometimes I do it to take photos like this. Sometimes I do it for a quiet place to have a cup of coffee. But while I'm on the roof, I close my eyes and I imagine myself in my location as if seen from the sky. I see my place within this block, my place within this city, then further away in the country and the world. In some way, I belong. I see the ruthless, indiscriminate forces of nature in Haiti. Cholera, brought from the United Nations peacekeepers working on the earthquake in Nepal. Syria. The fear. The base urges of revenge that keep wars united or ignited. People living on the outskirts of war, dealing with it every day. We know that nothing is isolated, and eventually the world reaches us, no matter where we are. As refugees, politics, divisions, conflict. In this final image, you see a funeral for a Syrian soldier. The intimacy and love that exists no matter which side of a war one finds themselves on. My job is to go into chaos and to try to make sense of it, to try to communicate the essence of the situation, make it understandable or not foreign. One moment in time, a cemented memory fit into a square box. The goal is empathy, empathy from chaos.